Today, I'd like to look into probably the key issue that was going on as the body of Israelites, the mixed multitude, came out of Egypt and were heading to Sinai, which is what we are rehearsing and walking through here as we walk through the plan of salvation. And the biggest issue I think that they were going through was the idea of believing or trusting or having faith in the Almighty, and faith in the one that had just annihilated and wiped out the Egyptians, that had set them free from the bondage. And yet, even in the light of the signs and wonders that they witnessed, they still struggled. They struggled mightily with their ability to trust and have faith and belief in the Creator of all things. I think we find that that also is true when we look at what was going on in the Brit Chadashah and the renewed covenant, and we see the struggles that the people had from the time of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection, and then going forward towards Shavuot, where they had the outpouring of the Spirit in the upper room. So let's begin and really dig into this idea of belief, and I think it may even be better to translate it belief, faith, or trust, since it has so much more elements to it when we look at the Hebrew and the Greek than it does just with the English word belief or faith. The Hebrew word that's being translated as belief is the word aman, which means to render or be firm or faithful, to trust or believe, to be permanent or quiet, morally to be true or certain. So there's a lot of depth to that word. In the Greek, it's pistis, which means to be persuaded. It has to do with moral conviction of religious truth or the truthfulness of Elohim or a religious teacher, especially reliance upon Messiah for deliverance. Abstractly, it means constancy in such profession, by extension, the system of religious truth itself. In other words, we're looking at here a consistency, a constancy, a relying upon. The word belief in Webster's dictionary would mean it's to take something as true or real, to trust a statement or promise of. You can see how that would fit into what was going on here, since we had the promises of Yahweh. We had the promises that we stand on that were made to our forefathers. The word faith in Webster's dictionary in English would come out as unquestioning belief, specifically in Elohim, complete trust or confidence, loyalty. Loyalty is a huge part of what we're going to see here. And then trust. Trust is a firm belief in the honesty, reliability, etc. of another. Confident expectation. That's a huge part of this. Confident expectation or hope, and responsibility resulting from the confidence placed in one. And these are all huge pieces. Just keep these in the back of your mind as we dig into this. So I want to begin in Exodus, in Shemot 19, and use this as a way to kind of lay the scene and the idea and the foundation of where we're going. So let's start in Exodus or Shemot 19 and in verse 1. In Shemot 19 and verse 1, it says, in the 3rd month after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they set out from Rephidim and came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, so Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, this is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Mitzrites, to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice, and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all peoples, for all the earth is mine. Now we're starting to really get into the meat here. He is telling them right up front, he's saying, look, if you diligently obey my voice, or my word, who is the voice of the Almighty? Yeshua. And guard my covenant that I make with who? With Yaakov, with that children of Israel. Then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples. And then he emphasizes his authority to do these things by saying, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation, a kingdom of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. Verse 8, and all the people answered together, verse 7, and Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh commanded him. So he set it before the elders, and listen to verse 8, and all the people answered together and said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. See, there's doing to be done. This is a huge, huge issue we are constantly talking about in the Messianic movement, is the idea that, believe it or not, we actually have to do what Yahweh says. We don't just do it because it's nice or we think it may make him happy. We do it because he requires it. He is trying to work with an obedient and submissive people. Now, he says, all the people said, all that Yahweh has spoken we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. Now listen to verse 9, though. And Yahweh said to Moshe, see, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak with you and believe you, Moshe, forever. Okay? And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yahweh. So all of this was to be done so that we would believe the words of Moshe forever, which are the words that Yahweh gave him. And the reason that's in there, I think, is because of us, because he knew, because he knows the end from the beginning, that we would have these written words that Moshe penned down for us so that we could read and understand the instructions of the Almighty. And so this was an emphasis on helping us to believe. Now, there's that key word in verse 9. He says, the people will hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. Now, I think if we look out there at the people that claim to be following from this instruction manual, that we would have a hard time making a case or argument that people are believing these instructions. People are not standing up and saying, Amen and Amen, what Yahweh said we will do. All that Yahweh said we will do. I think we will find that this is a huge problem, and you know what? We find that problem is, again, in the Brit Hadashah. But I want to read one more thing here from Deuteronomy before we go there. Deuteronomy chapter 9 and verse 7. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 7. Remember, do not forget how you provoked to wrath Yahweh your Elohim in the wilderness. From the day that you came out of the land of Mitzrayim until you came to this place, you have been rebellious against Yahweh. You have been rebellious against Yahweh. Even in Horeb, you made Yahweh wroth, so that Yahweh was enraged with you to destroy you. When I went up into the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which Yahweh made with you, then I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I did not eat bread, nor I drink water. Then Yahweh gave me the 2 tablets of the stone, written with the finger of Elohim, and on them were all the words which Yahweh had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. And it came to be at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights that Yahweh gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Then Yahweh said to me, arise, go down quickly from here, for your people whom you brought out of Mitzrayim have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded image. And Yahweh spoke to me, saying, I have seen this people, and look, they are stiff-necked people. And I don't think a whole lot has changed since this event. We are still dealing, and Yahweh is still dealing with a stiff-necked people. And notice here, as he's talking, that we have something very interesting in verse 12. Yahweh is talking to Moshe, saying, go down quickly, for your people who you brought out of Egypt have acted corruptly. All of a sudden, Yahweh has made a separation. Rebellion and acting corruptly turns you into a people unto a people as opposed to a people unto the Almighty. Who is going to be ruler over us? Are we going to be self-sovereign? Are we going to allow the alternative system of the deception of the deceiver, the adversary Hasatan, to be ruling over us? Or are we going to submit to the Almighty and let his words rule and be obedient and submissive to his words? And in doing so, it takes a large, large amount of trust and belief and faith. And that's what the challenge is. And we see that throughout this journey from Egypt to Sinai. Let's go to Luke chapter 18 and verse 8. Luke chapter 18 and in verse 8. Luke chapter 18 and in verse 8. I say to you that he shall write to them speedily, but when the Son of Adam comes, shall he find belief on the earth? Now, I know that's cutting into a story and a parable, but is that not an incredibly profound statement? That is a scary, scary statement. He says that when he returns, will he find belief on the earth? Will he find belief on the earth? Will he find those that trust, have faith, that believe, that take the promises that he made as true, that they trust in those promises. What a profound statement that we are dealing with here. And yet it's completely in line with what Yahweh said to Moses. Look, I'm dealing with a rebellious and stiff-necked people. These people had just seen him completely trash and lay waste to Egypt with the signs from the and wonders of the plagues. And yet here they are in Deuteronomy at the foot of the Jordan after 40 years in the wilderness, after all the signs and wonders of the manna, the miracles of the water, all of the provision he gave them all those years, yet still he's calling them a stiff-necked people. And yet we wonder why he allows trials and tribulations and all these things to come upon us. Well, he's allowing them so that we become less stiff-necked, so he can bend us and mold us and work with us. You know, Deuteronomy 8:2, we always go there, so let's go there just so we always kind of stay consistent here, because I believe that's such a foundational verse. In Deuteronomy 8:2 it says, "And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble you," there's the stiff neck breaking, "to prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not." That's ultimately what we're talking about here. We go the journey we're on, our own personal walk through our own personal wilderness, that we're now kind of rehearsing and walking through in the plan of salvation as we went through Pesach and then unleavened bread and now headed towards Shavuot. You know, people claim to be believers. People claim to have faith. People claim to have the truth. People claim a lot of things. But there's a reason why we have this annual instruction to examine ourselves. We are told to daily examine ourselves. We know annually we are to examine ourselves before Passover so that we have an awareness of our current level of belief. I propose to you today that it's our actions in the form of our Torah obedience, Torah submissiveness, or lack of our Torah obedience or submissiveness, in the context of our reliance upon these actions to lead to our ending up in the kingdom, and not our words that demonstrate our level of belief, faith, and trust in the Father and the Son. Now notice what I said was our reliance upon these actions that lead to our ending up in the kingdom. I didn't say that the actions are what create salvation or make salvation available. This is such a huge problem for people to kind of grasp. Salvation was provided free of charge, absolutely having nothing to do with anything you or I have ever done or ever could do, but because of what the Messiah did. That he paid a price that made salvation possible. Now, whether or not, this is the key here, whether or not you get to enjoy it, whether or not you get to go and live in it and experience it and be in the kingdom is going to be completely up to us being submissive to the teachings and instructions, the desires of the Almighty. Remember, we talked about this the other week. There's only one salvation issue. The Almighty, for whatever reason, is desiring to have a bunch of people to live with forever. Therefore, salvation exists to allow this to happen. Salvation meaning a way to allow us as sinners to eventually become tahor or clean so that we can live with him forever. If he is looking for a people to live with forever, then ultimately the one salvation issue is, are you becoming the type of person he wants to live with forever? And a lot of it's going to depend on what we show him, as we read in Deuteronomy 8:2. It's going to depend on, are we being humbled? When we are tested, are we proving to him that is within our heart to keep his commandments? Or are we proving to him that it's not within our hearts to keep his commandments? This is very, very important. Let's begin by looking at several instances that I believe are representative of the state or level of our belief, faith, and trust today. As we will see, not much has changed since the gathering of the mixed multitude that we were talking about earlier at the foot of Sinai, or since the time when Yeshua walked the earth with his disciples. Let's go to Numbers, Bimidbar 11 and verse 4. You know, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and that's unfortunately the case. Remember we talked about this on a previous week about paradigm shifts. We're right now needing to make the paradigm shift where we grow up and we get out of our diapers, stop sucking on our pacifiers, and move forward from this place that we've been, the stiff-necked, rebellious, untrusting, unbelieving bunch of people. Because while we use our mouth, our words, remember I said this a little bit earlier, I said it's our actions, not our words, that demonstrate our level of faith. All of us speak and talk a good talk. We talk that talk so well. But do our actions match the talk? Are we walking the talk? And Yahweh is saying here that those when they came out of Egypt didn't do it. We see with Yeshua that he didn't see it, because that's why he said, when I return, will I find faith? Now let's look at Numbers 11 in verse 4. And we'll read through verse 6. And the mixed multitude who were in their midst lusted greatly. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, Who is giving us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate without cost in Mitzrayim, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. Wow, slavery was so good. But now our throat is dried up. There is nothing to look at but this manna. Ah, look at the people complaining. This is the people you would think would just be so trusting after seeing what Yahweh did at this parting of the sea, what Yahweh did in Mitzrayim and taking them out of bondage, what he did to the Egyptians, what he did to the whole land of Egypt, what he did to lay waste and make a mockery of their gods. And yet, here they are whining and complaining. We're hungry. We can't believe you. We don't trust you. And look at the delusion that comes into their minds. We were living in a paradise. We were like sitting at the Ritz-Carlton, sitting down and being fed for free, cucumbers and melons and fish and all this great stuff. You got to be kidding me. It's probably what Moshe was thinking and Yahweh was thinking at this point. But we know that in the book that we hold in our hands when we're reading through the scriptures, that we see that there's story after story that matches exactly this. And I think we all have personal stories that can say that, you know what, things have not changed that much in the last 6,000 years. It's pretty much the same problem. Isn't that ultimately the very first thing that the adversary did when he came to Chava and Adam and say, do you really believe and trust in what Yahweh said to you? I mean, it's always about challenging our belief and our trust and reliance upon what Yahweh says. Look at Numbers chapter 20. Bimidbar, Numbers chapter 20 and verse 1. And we'll read 5 verses here. And the children of Israel, all the congregation, came into the wilderness of Sin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled against Moshe and against Aaron. Here we go again. They were hungry, and now they're thirsty. And not only are they going to, instead of coming and just asking and saying, hey, you know what, we're thirsty, we don't know what's going on, but we know we should turn to Yahweh, they came against Moshe and against Aaron. And the people contended with Moshe and spoke, saying, if only we had died when our brothers died before Yahweh. Why have you brought us up, brought up the assembly of Yahweh into this wilderness that we and our livestock should die here? And why have you brought us up and out of Mitzrayim to bring us to this evil place, not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink? Well. I do a whole teaching section on this where it's basically called Whine, Complain, Complain. But you know what? We're the same. Let's not judge them. We're the same. Don't tell me that you don't have your moments where your big brother, who's watching you all the time, because big brother is watching, and I'm not talking about the government here. Our big brother Yeshua is watching. And don't tell me he doesn't catch you whining and complaining. Guilty. I'm raising my hand. You can't see it here on Pal Talk, but I'm guilty. We're all guilty. So let's not be too hard on these people. And don't tell me that the Almighty has not done signs and wonders in your life. Well, you should know better than to be sitting there whining and complaining. But yet we do. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. Matityahu chapter 6. Matityahu chapter 6 and in verse 25. Matthew 6:25. And we'll read to verse 34. Okay. Because of this I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat or drink, or about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than the food, and the body more than clothing? Now, wait a second. Yeshua is dealing with the exact same problem here now as was going on in the book of Numbers. He said, don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink. People were complaining. They were hungry. They were thirsty. They didn't know where the water or the food or the funds were going to come to have it. Well, guess what? We're going into a time just like this. Okay? We're going into a time that we know is going to be just like this. And it will be hard to find food and drink. It will be hard to know where your provision is coming from unless we have the trust and faith and belief in the true provider of all things. Which is why we have to be very wary of the warning. Yeshua says, well, when I return, will I find people that believe, people that stood with trust, that stood in faith? Continuing in chapter 6 and in verse 26. This is still Matthew. Look at the birds of the heaven, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into storehouses, yet your heavenly Father does feed them. Are you not worth more than they? I mean, he's saying, come on, people, get with it now. Let's be real. And which of you, by worrying, is able to add 1 cubit to its lifespan? Worrying doesn't serve any purpose. He says, so why do you worry about clothing? Note well the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, and I say to you that even Shlomo, Solomon, in all his esteem was not dressed like one of these. But if Elohim so clothes the grass of the field, which exists today and tomorrow and is thrown into the furnace, how much more you, here it comes, O you of little belief, of little faith, of little trust. Do not worry then, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For all these the Gentiles, the Goyim, the nations seek for. See, we're supposed to be different. The nations are seeking and worrying and complaining and panicking about all this stuff. We're supposed to know better. We're supposed to be separated. We're supposed to be a called out, chosen people. And yet we act just like they do. We worry just like they do. We whine and complain just like they do. He says, verse 33. Continuing verse 32. For all these the Gentiles seek for, and your heavenly Father knows that you need all of these. Come on, do we not know that the Almighty knows everything? And if he knows everything, doesn't he know you're hungry? Doesn't he know you're thirsty? Doesn't he know that you may not know, that you may be panicking about how you're going to pay your rent or your mortgage payment? Don't you think he knows all these things? But he's not avoiding helping you or delivering you out of these challenges for just no purpose. He's waiting for you to give it over to him and trust him. Stop trying to figure it out for yourself. Stop trying to panic and freak out about it. Hand it over to him. Say, Father, I trust you. I believe in you. And I know you will lead me to a solution. You provide a solution. We know that no challenge or trial has come upon us that is not uncommon to man. There's only common things that happen to us. And yet, he does not allow these things to come upon us unless he knows, A, we can handle it, and B, he will provide a way of escape. We all know these verses, but yet we panic.